My name is Nima Farshchi. I'm very excited to discuss social responsibility with you today, one of Alpha Kappa Psi's pillars. An overview of this presentation, we're going to discuss who I am, give a brief introduction to the Center for Social Value Creation and what social responsibility really means. We're going to dive deeper into the change in the purpose of business and how it's changed over the past few years, past few decades, and past few generations, and then dive further deeper into what impact-driven metrics and what are the tools and skills you need to have for your future careers. A brief overview about myself. I'm an Omega Theta alum, which is the University of Maryland. I'm actually a triple Smith Terp. Terp is the University of Maryland mascot for those of you who aren't familiar, and Smith is our business school. So I did my undergraduate at UMD, my MBA at UMD, and now I actually work at the University of Maryland's business school. So it's been an exciting journey. In the in-between, I actually worked in charter school operations. So what a charter school is, it's a public school that's run by a private entity. And what you do in operations is pretty much all of the core business skills you need, from marketing to management to supply chain, whatever it might be. So it's pretty much running the business side of a school. My personal mission has always been how to use education to create the greatest tool for impact and a trickle-down effect in society, and using business skills to have the greatest impact for our next generation. So a little bit about the Center for Social Value Creation here at the University of Maryland. Our mission is to educate, engage, and empower students to create a better world through business. We truly believe that profit and purpose are synonymous, so there is never a time that you have to sacrifice your social responsibility for making a smart business choice. And we try to create mindsets where students can create both profit and purpose in their future careers and also in their current university experiences. So a little bit about the original purpose of business. For decades and generations, the mindset of business was that as long as you are creating a profit, you're hitting your bottom line, and you're giving a profit to your shareholders to take home, that is the only responsibility that your business has for society. Whether you're talking about the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, as long as you are creating a profit, and this profit is going towards your shareholders, that's all you have to do. Nothing else matters. And that means that you're achieving your role as a business. This kind of shifted to having at least a basic moral compass, especially in the 60s. It became a mindset of, well, we are also paying taxes, and our tax dollars are going back to society, and that's our social responsibility, is to be ethical and pay our taxes correctly. And also we're helping those communities that we're around, we're creating more jobs. And as a business, we're being socially responsible because we're helping out others by giving them those jobs and those tools to succeed, which helps grow the neighborhoods that we're located in. So the fact that we only exist and the fact that we are a thing in society is our own true social responsibility. This mindset really shifted, especially towards the 80s to the 2000s, to a mindset of, is it not just that we need to do the basic legal requirements, but do we actually owe more to our greater neighborhoods, to our greater communities, and to the greater society as a whole? It's a mindset of, in addition to our business practices, we owe philanthropic endeavors for our neighborhoods. In addition to our business practices, we should volunteer for our greater communities. And it was very much, this is something that we're doing in addition. These also might be great mindsets of how we can help recruiting, how we can help marketing, how we can help other aspects of a business. But the social responsibility of a business is very much, we just need to do other things in addition to our regular business practices to have a societal impact on those in our greater communities and in our greater neighborhoods. And again, this was from about the 80s to the 2000s. Then in the mid 2000s, this mindset of a triple bottom line came out, when we owe more to both people, planet, but addition profit. So it's having that focus of, how can we do good things for those in our neighborhoods? How can we do good things for our greater planet? But in addition, how can we do both of those and focus on profit at the same time? The key difference between this and the last slide was a greater incorporation into a company's values. However, social responsibility at this point between 2005 and 2015 really shifted to a mindset of As long as we are checking these 3 boxes, even if we're sacrificing one for the other, these are the 3 boxes we need to check. And as long as we have this impact on our people and planet, but we can sometimes skimp off on profit, or we're having our profit and we're helping the planet, but if we hurt people, so be it. It was, let's check as many boxes of these as we can. Now, what's really exciting is how society has shifted in this new 2020 mindset. In 2019, for those of you who are familiar, the Business Roundtable is pretty much a union of big businesses where CEOs sit together and decide what the purpose of business is, how to lobby, how to have a mindset, and where industry is moving towards and where industry's future is. 181 Fortune 500 CEOs got together last August and signed a document that says that the purpose of a corporation has shifted, that it's no longer stakeholder or shareholder value, it's no longer people or planet or profit. It's finding ways to incorporate how we do better into our day-to-day decision making. It's no longer how can we do good in addition to making profit, it's how we make profit doing good for society at the same time. Not just taxes, not just employment, but a greater, larger purpose. The mindset has really shifted, and ways that you can see this are companies like International Paper. International Paper is, for those of you who are not familiar, a company that is a literal paper mill. They make hammer mill paper. They made 50% of Amazon's Prime boxes. You probably interact with them 100 times a day. And when you think of social responsibility, you usually don't think of a paper mill. But what International Paper has had for over 50 years in their mindset is that they have always planted 5 trees for every one that they cut down. This isn't something that they've done as a publicity stunt in the 80s. This isn't something new to their business practices. This is something that's been true to their DNA. But the reason they do this is a very simple supply and demand question. They realize that if they're not being responsible for their greater environments, if they're not being responsible for their greater resources, it's going to run out of their product. But in the 80s, they took this a step further. In the 80s, they shifted it to water sustainability. And for those of you who don't know, when a paper mill is taking water to go through and create that lumber into new paper, the water resources that they're going through actually deteriorates the quality of the water in the neighborhood. International Paper realized that if we're doing this, within 20 years, we're going to destroy this estuary and we're going to have to build a new $50 million facility. But if we actually focus on water sustainability and reusability of that water, we can have this facility so we're depreciating it at a longer expense. So for them, it is that it's helping save those estuaries, but at the same time, they're saving millions of dollars through depreciation. So it's very much having that purpose be twofold. And another great example is Royal Farms, who's actually the daughter of the CEO and their marketing manager is an AK Psi alum and a Towson chapter advisor now. Royal Farms, for those of you who don't know, is very much a gas station that sells fried chicken. Think Wawa, think Sheetz, think any of those larger chains that you have. What's cool about Royal Farms and their bottom line purpose of a business is that Royal Farms, when they take their gas station fried chicken oil, they actually convert it into diesel gasoline for the truckers that come through. And the purpose of that is to cut costs. Yes, it is great for carbon emissions. Yes, it is great for our planet. But also it's shaving down costs for their bottom line because they are a business that has such low margins. Another great thing about Royal Farms is they've actually gotten their marketing down to a science. They give over $500,000 a year to Baltimore City education initiatives. Their purpose for that isn't to help education. Their purpose for that is they're doing good while making profit. They realize that giving money to these education organizations increases the employment rate of Baltimore, which increases drivers on the road, which increases people pumping their gas and increases people eating their chicken, which long-term is much more profitable for them than having another marketing campaign. So their mindset is, if our ROI is greater by giving to education, then why don't we do this rather than doing another ad campaign, then increase our neighborhood's overall GDP? So there's two ways that corporations have been really measuring this impact. And these are just some data points we were sharing, but the two metrics are going through environmental, social, and governance decisions to show their social responsibility, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So ESG is having that focus where you're getting real metrics on your environmental impact, on your stakeholder impact, and your governance impact. They're actually quantifying it. So it's not saying we had a day of service. It's saying that the net kilograms of CO2 that we're emitting into the atmosphere had this much of an effect, but then monetizing that for long-term ROI for a company. So you might wonder who is actually using this. So a lot of larger banks like BlackRock, which invests over $7 trillion, State Street, and JP Morgan all use ESG metrics as a calculation of risk when they're looking to invest in a company. JP Morgan actually found that a huge governance risk is having a non-diverse board. If you're having an all-white, male, straight Christian board, on average, you're making 3% less profit than those in your industry. And they found out that it's the profitable thing to invest in diverse boards. So in 2020, they said none of their new investments would be for a homogeneous board, and they need to have one diverse board member. And in 2021, they're upping that to 2 board members. Every one of these new financial institutions is using these metrics, not as a tool for impact, but as a tool for risk classification, and showing that if you don't care about social implications, if you don't care about the environment, and if you don't have smart governance and board practices, you're showing long-term unprofitability. And on average, depending on which metric you're using, companies that rank higher in ESG within their own industries make approximately 2.7 to 4.2% greater profit than others in those industries. We had a question from Aaron regarding what boards upped it to 2. So it's very interesting because if you think about even the smaller example, and Alexis Ohanian, who's the CEO, former CEO and board chairman of Reddit, who's also a UVA alum of Alpha Kappa Psi, he was the first CEO who stepped down from his role as chairman of the board because his wife, who is, I believe it's Serena Williams, not Venus Williams, was a Black woman. And he saw that he wanted his daughter, who's biracial, to see that this is something that we all need to do and we all need to stand for. So that was a great example of a CEO publicly stepping up. There's a lot of different other organizations who have started to do it. What's been interesting, though, is with ESG metrics, a lot of them aren't considering just having a chief diversity officer as part of their quantifiable metrics. They see that having a chief diversity officer who is a person of a minority actually doesn't increase long-term profitability. It's when you have that board member from different organizations. There have been dozens who are doing it. I'm just using an AKSI example with Reddit, but there are a ton of companies out there who have gone through this process. Now, when we're talking about how to actually show where we can help and talking about those environmental, social, and governance needs, these are very much done through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a metric for success. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the UN's SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are 17 goals that the United Nations set in 2015 that countries need to reach by 2030 to be able to have a long-term renewable planet. These aren't sustainability in the sense of climate change, while climate action is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Zero hunger, no poverty, reduced inequalities, all of these are different SDGs that we need to hit to be able to have a sustainable planet. When the UN pitched out these SDGs, the mindset was for countries to take them as benchmarks for legislation. What's very interesting is corporations have actually embraced them much stronger than many nations have. Per a PwC survey from last year, 72% of corporations, whether it's in their formal annual report to shareholders or it's in their 10Ks, reference the SDGs as opportunities for growth or risks for their organization. The SDGs actually go to 25% of annual board strategy reports as well. So these aren't just things that are on a marketing piece of paper or an environmental piece of paper. These are typical board projections per a typical business decision-making per the PwC report from last year. Now, what's interesting is companies aren't trying to say, we are going to focus on hypothetically quality education and gender equality, but we're actually a paper mill. What they try to do with the SDGs is incorporate them into a typical business practice of theirs. So if you're talking about a financial institution, they would focus on quality education and working on gender equality. And a great example is Visa with all of their education for women in high school services, because they know internationally, if they're trying to have more card holders down the road, focusing on education and focusing on gender equality are their two biggest potential target markets. So it's not just doing well, but it's also doing well to make a long-term profit. So that's kind of been the benchmark of how to have that impact space. So what's next? As we're seeing, we have countless challenges in our current state, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's Black Lives Matter being an issue that's finally to the forefront, whether it's climate change, whether it's gender equality throughout the world, whether it's access to technology that's needed. We have all of these challenges. And the most efficient way to make this difference in our society is through business-driven change. If we're going to wait for our government institutions to make these impacts, we're going to be waiting for generations before we have a change. But if we have a strong set of principal business leaders, and each of them are leading their organization with this framework of how you can do well, how you can make an impact, and how you can make a profit at the same time, everyone can have the greatest impact on society by being a principal business leader, by whether you're in your entry-level job, your mid-level career, or you're the C-suite executive, you're able to have that impact on your day-to-day corporate business decision-making that's both socially responsible and profit-driven at the same time.